So this one might feel a little bit more like a vlog than a class, but lots of people have asked me about this, and last month I got asked like 6 times in a row by people, so I figured let's just do a class on it. Answer the questions, open the discussion, especially because post-COVID, my work has gone through some pretty big transformations, and so I think it's an interesting discussion for other people who are doing the work, and something to consider for people who are trying to do the work. And so this week we'll be talking about my experiences as a full-time professional herbalist. First, to establish a little bit of a baseline for everything we're going to talk about, I am traditionally trained. So I went to 3 full-time clinical herbalism university level programs, studying with people that I really respect and going through syllabus-based programs that focused on anatomy, pathology, physiology. I was doing nursing level A&P on my own, and had also gone through myotherapeutic level massage school for the anatomy aspect of things. So I really had that foundation, and then went on to do apprenticeship style learning with some of my favorite teachers and practitioners. And my own education in herbalism kind of went backwards for most people, in that in my early teens, actually starting at about 12, I got really into occult botany. Of course, reading the works of Scott Cunningham and Paul Byral. I started there. And so really into folkloric herbalism and plant magic and herbal magic and plant fueled rituals, and all of that was really, really crucial to me. And it wasn't until my mid-20s that the medicinal aspect of plants started to become a little more meaningful to me, because they got me through some really rough stuff, right? So I think a lot of people come into this work herbal medicine first, and then realizing, oh, there's something more to this, right? There's like a magical aspect and a ritual aspect, and that's all really cool. And we try to do both of them because it's awesome. So for me, it was a little big backwards, and I think it's important to know because there's kind of a full circle aspect to the story, which I'm going to try to make brief. So I went into practice here where I live in Salt Lake City in 2016. And I was really just working with people that I knew and getting referrals from practitioners in kind of adjunct therapies to work with their clients with herbal medicine. And I was pretty green. I had really education, and I had a really fleshed out formulary that was my own, meaning I had formula that I had written that I had spent years working on, and I was really proud of, and there are formulas in there that I continue to work with today. In fact, if you have bought formula from me before, you've probably gotten some of those, right? So they've been around a long time, and I kind of thought that was the direction I was going to go. I'm going to write formula, right? I'm going to make product, and whether I make it myself or write formula for some big company or do some co-packing thing, I really love writing formulation, and it's really fun for me, and I like the testing process, and I like, now the more ritualized process of it takes to make sure that all the herbs in a formula make sense on a phytochemical level, and makes sense on an energetic constitutional level, but also makes sense energetically, and then seeing how they land when they're introduced into all different kinds of bodies. So my work really started with formulation, and then from there I didn't go clinical. I actually went teaching, which was super weird because the first class that I ever did was a public class put on at the Salt Lake City Public Library, and I had never even used a microphone before. Right? I'd never spoken on a microphone, never done karaoke. I'd never spoken to a group of people in a formal setting. And so I went from never having done that to teaching a room of 150 some odd people. And I got the bug. I realized that while I may not be a great teacher, I really like talking about this stuff with people and getting people fired up and inspiring people to have questions and working through those questions and kind of facilitating people getting into this work in their own way. So that is like the first sort of more professional expression of my herbalism. Like I said, I had been seeing clients and writing formula, but nobody knew who I was, and I didn't really have a lot of opportunities yet to do what I wanted to do in the city. And so what the teaching did was created a space for me to create the market that I then filled, right? There wasn't a market here, and so I, through classes, through teaching, through showing up at all the events, I tried to create that market to let people know, hey, this is a thing, right? And I'm doing it. So if you're interested and you like the way I do it, come take classes, come to workshops, let's go on herb walks, let's make medicine, let me make medicine for you. And that's kind of how it all started for me. And I should also say too, that early on, and I still have a place for this in my heart, early on, I considered myself a tea herbalist. There's a lot of reasons for that. I have other classes on it, but I really love making tea, and I really love the ritual, the inherent sort of, you don't have to know what you're doing to do the ritual of tea, that it requires us to slow down and to make and to steep and to wait, and it's organoleptic, and we get to come into contact with the raw plant material, right? So I really loved tea, and I was formulating so much tea for local restaurants and for events, and I still do that to this day. I really had myself convinced, like, I'm never gonna work with tinctures, I'm never gonna work with capsules, I'm just gonna make tea for people, and people are gonna drink tea, and it's gonna be great. Still a really beautiful idea, not practical, right? The bane of the herbalist is compliance, and getting clients to comply with a tincture protocol is hard enough, let alone asking them to drink 8 cups of tea a day to get a therapeutic dose of an herb. So that didn't work out so well. Still love tea, right? For people who will drink tea, drink the tea. So that evolved into teaching and starting to take on clients one-to-one. And then when things really changed was in 2018 when I opened my shop. I opened an herb store in Salt Lake City, Green Thread Apothecary, and we started out in a little pop-up space behind a plant store, which was really cool. It was beautiful. And within about 3 months, outgrew that maybe 125 square feet room we were in and moved to the other side of the city into the historic Avenues district of Salt Lake City, and still in a really tiny space, probably, I think, like 700 square foot total, shotgun style. That included our storage, our prep space, our bathroom, our sinks, hand washing sinks, dishwashing, like everything 700 feet. So it doesn't feel tiny, but once you lose all that square footage to prep, the footprint of the store itself was probably about 450 square feet. And again, it was shotgun, so it was like long and thin. You'd kind of come in, and if there was other people in there, you had to like awkwardly get around. If somebody wanted to come in and talk about their stuff, pretty much everybody could hear what you were talking about. There was no privacy, and we were there for a really long time. Stocked a massive selection of bulk organic herbs, which is really fun, selling herbs by the ounce. But the real magic in what I did there was a model that I haven't really seen anywhere else, and it's a model that I continue to support and I think is the right way to do things, in my opinion, which is that our back room, we had 280 some odd simple tinctures that everything was crafted by hand with the exception of mushrooms, which I procured from feral fungi, and a couple of herbs that were hard to work with. I would let professional, people with extract machines do those, and we would just bring them in 16-ounce quantities. So I had this big floor-to-ceiling shelf, climbable shelf, filled with big bottles of tincture. And the magic in that was that when people came into the shop, I could sell them Herb Farm, I could sell them, Wish Garden, I could sell them patent formulas, broad spectrum formulas, and we did a fair amount of that. But I could also have a relatively brief conversation with them over the counter and then formulate and compound a formula tincture specifically for them. And this is just not something that you see in herb shops now. Most herb shops are a retail experience. You go in, they have herbs, you buy them, the people who work there know about herbs, and they can say this herb is good for this and this herb is good for this, and they probably have some branded stuff, again, Herb Farm, Wish Garden, Banyan, Himalayan, whatever, and those formulas are structure function, so they'll say on there this is good for focus and memory, and they'll say you take this for focus and memory. No one at the time, and still I'm really not sure, with the exception of a couple of Chinese apothecaries, is doing what I was doing, because it's hard. It puts you on the spot. It puts a lot of pressure on your cred as an herbalist to be able to have a relatively brief conversation with somebody, not in a very private setting, get as much of the information as you need from them, and immediately transform that into a formula and a protocol, and then go make that formula for them with the proper ratios, the proper strengths, while they wait, for 5 minutes. I was lucky enough to have fantastic interns all the time and a couple of employees. So I would be able to spend my time talking to people, and then I would write out their formulation, and then I would hand it to somebody in the back, and they would follow basically a recipe that I wrote and put that together, and then they would bring it up and I'd say, here's your protocol, here's how often I want you to take this. And it transformed the way that people engaged with herbalism, because it felt personal and they felt heard, and the medicine was made just for them. Our labels were really cute. They were printed, but the ingredients in them would be handwritten, right? Because everything was custom. And I still believe that's the best way. And I say this to any budding herbalists out there: do the 10 to 15 years of work that it takes to get to a point where you are in such a deep relationship with the plants that you can have a 5 to 10 minute conversation with somebody and be inspired with everything you need to do formulation for that person. There's nothing wrong with broad spectrum. I have 80 something broad spectrum formula that I've written over the years, and I continue to make those, and people continue to buy them. I can make you a sleep formula all day long that's custom for you, but I have a few sleep formulas that I've made broad spectrum that people still swear by and still buy from me, right? So there's nothing wrong with formulating broad spectrum. And I think if you're gonna go do events, farmers markets, have an online shop, you gotta have broad spectrum medicine, right? Because you don't know who that medicine's going to. You don't know the body it's going into. But when we can custom formulate all the medicine that we make people, that's when herbalism really unfolds as a magic, as a practice, right? That it's happening in the moment, it's happening for the person involved, it's happening with the particular plants that are being called into the medicine. And for me, that's my way of doing it, right? It's not the easy way, it's not the comfortable way, it's not the way that will make you rich, but it's the way that gives people the opportunity to have these relationships with herbs. I feel super fortunate for being in a situation where I've been able to write books and to teach all over the place and to win awards for my herbalism. That's why I think that happens, right? Not because I'm inherently great, but because I try to do the work in a way that centers the relationships, that centers the plant spirits, and that's just really important to me. So doing that, and I will say this, it's very, very hard work, right? You are carrying a lot of people's stuff. People are generally not coming to talk to you because things are going great for them. They're coming to talk to you because they are in pain, because they are suffering, because things are not going well, and they're trying to figure out how to get back to where they were. Here where I live, I also experienced, working with people at the end of their rope, they were coming to me not because they were excited about herbalism or that they believed in it or that they were inspired, but because everything else they've tried hasn't worked. That they've gone to all the doctors, all the specialists, done all the things, spent all the money, and somebody was like, oh, you should go talk to this guy and see if he can help you. So they come into me just exhausted, angry, broke, tired, hopeless. And that's a hard energy to be around, you know what I mean, all the time. But that's the reality of it. We think about the retail side of herb shop, people coming in and buying herbs tends to be a little funner, right? People are working on projects, they're making soaps, they're making fire cider, they found a cool tea recipe they want to make. Like, that is such a fun vibe. It's just got a different energy. But then when you open the clinical aspect of things, you know, it's a stark reminder that people are into that space because they don't feel good on whatever level. And so your days are sometimes filled with people who don't feel good. And you know, as somebody who wants to do everything they can to transform that person's life, to give them as many tools as you possibly can to help them feel better, it can be a lot, you know. And there were many, many days where I would close the clinic for the day and I would kind of just have to sit there, you know, and go through the list of people that I saw. I would often see 35 to 40 people in a day. And bless all of them and thank all of them and like kind of let it go before I came home, because it's just like a lot to carry, right? Anybody in any clinical field knows how it feels. So that's something to consider, you know, that when you're with people face to face, in person, unwinding their stuff, it's in the air, you know, energetically, and you got to learn to, I believe, healthy boundaries, but I also believe in holding somebody's hand while we do the work and kind of going there with them and giving them some support and seeing what it's like. So for me, as somebody who practices too now on a more intuitive level, you know, I get into it with people. That's just my style, but it can be heavy, you know, so that's something to consider. But the greater amount of it is so much fun. The other side of it that I like to talk to people about is the retail side of it, right? Of owning an herb shop, of owning an apothecary. It's not the glamorous, chill, hippie vibes experience people think it is. Like, you see on the surface, you get to come into a shop and it smells so good, and hopefully the lighting is warm and comforting, and you can see all the herbs and the energy in there of people talking about plants, and the presence of all the plants is intoxicating. But behind that, you know, you're doing inventory, you're planning medicine making, you are managing humans, you are trying to pay bills and taxes and get the needs of your community met and organize classes and answer questions. And it's a business, right? So the bane of all artists is the part where a lot of artists are not good at business management, right? So they get into trouble because all they want to do is make art or sing or whatever, and they end up having to have somebody else manage their career for them so they can focus on what they want to do and what they're good at, and their man focus on the business stuff. There are not those kinds of resources in this world. You know, the shops I know of that have been around the longest, I'm not going to say any names, that are the most famous, the ones that all of us know about, still have an owner that's probably staying up until midnight, a few nights a week, crunching numbers, figuring stuff out, doing orders, even if that owner on the surface appears to be very hands-off from the business, right? It took for me until year 3 before I could afford to hire a bookkeeper. So I was keeping all my books myself, and I wasn't doing a very good job at it. So I constantly would screw up and things wouldn't add up, and I'd have to go back and do the whole thing over again. And it was like, kind of took the fun out of it, right? Meanwhile, taking care of clients, writing formulas, seeing people all day, doing marketing, trying to keep the business afloat because it's a business. And in my city, Salt Lake City, where I live, the current government structure here is very anti-small business, right? So they are doing intentionally everything they can to push small businesses out of the city. They are destroying and demolishing the cool, old 50 to 100-year-old buildings that would normally be affordable and accessible spaces for small business. They're destroying all that. Our entire city is destroyed right now and constantly under construction. And they're building these, pretty shiny, snap together high-rise apartment buildings that nobody can afford to live in. And the ground floor, the ground 2 floors are supposed to be earmarked for retail space. The issue is because the cost of these buildings is so high, they're asking people to come in at half the square footage for 5 to 6 times the rent, and it's really problematic, right? So we see small businesses dropping like flies here. Businesses that have been in business for 10, 15, 20 years have not survived. Part of it, I think, of course, is COVID. COVID was really hard on a lot of people. My shop was the exception to that. We did okay. We actually got busy for the first 3 months of COVID, and then we got back to normal. So we never really got hit hard in a negative way, and actually did pretty good for those first 3 months in 2020. It was after that when these feelings of impending recession and all of that, and then all of the city development that had happened, it was just neither here nor there. I don't want to bore you with all that, but the point is that you're running a business, and this is the part that I tell people, like, you're not going to make it if you don't treat it like a business. And that is where I failed. I was in this great little spot in this old neighborhood, I told you, not far from downtown, the city center. I had great rent. I was renting the building from the owner. We had a great rapport. He liked what I was doing. I made a lot of improvements to the space before we even moved into that. I mean, putting in new flooring, brightening it up, new lighting, like try to keep it open and bright and welcoming so people could walk by and it wasn't this like dingy hobbit hole, and they were like, oh, what's going on in there? We wanted people to walk by and be able to see everything and see that they could step in there and feel comfortable. So all that, and I got this opportunity to move into a space in the middle of the city on one of our only remaining walkable streets that had a protected bike lane, where there were some other really good small businesses, and that felt like a good move to me. It was not, ultimately. The rent was 5 times what I was paying in my previous spot, and that in order for me to make that work, sales would need to go up 5 times, which for the extra space, I was pretty sure I could make that work between classes and bringing in some different product and just having more business, but that did not happen. We moved and nothing changed, right? We maintained relatively steady growth month after month, but it wasn't big enough to keep that growth. And so within 6 months, I was in a huge amount of debt and was paying for everything with credit cards, and was working a side job outside of my own shop to try to make things work, and we eventually didn't make it. So that's the story that you hear time and time again from small business, that you do everything you can to keep the doors open and you put everything you have into it, and sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you try, it just doesn't work, right? So that being said, I still love what I do. And I still do what I do, right? I teach constantly, and that's really the direction that my work has gone in. I still work with clients, and I love it. And I still have plans to open my shop again at some point, when the right space comes along and when I recover from the financial situation that losing that shop put me in, right? Because it's not like, oh, you close the shop, you're good now. It's like, no, you close the shop with all of the business's debt, right? And now you don't have the business to pay the business's debt. So that's where it gets a little sticky. But I'm not done, is what I'm saying. And I'm not saying this to scare anybody. I'm saying this to prepare you that if you're going to do this and you're the artist type, you're the person that wants to come in and talk to plants and read people's tongues and write formula and design pretty labels, do that, but find a business partner or get yourself in a situation where you can hire somebody who can do all the other stuff for you. Because if you try to do everything and you're like me, you're gonna miss some important stuff. You're gonna make a move like I did, not a smart move to make. And that's just live and learn, right? There was really good stuff that came out of that loss. As you know, if we would have went back to February and you would have told me that, I probably would have gave you the look. But now, only 6 months later, I can say, actually, yeah, there was some interesting stuff that came out of that. Ways that I needed to adapt and adjust my work and really just like step back from it. So I love what I do. This is all I ever want to do. It makes me happy. I like to think I'm good at it. And I'm trying to find new ways all the time to make this accessible to people, whether that's, adapting to meet people online or finding community spaces where I can meet people where they're at. I'm always trying to play with it, right? And refine it and keep it adaptable and keep that adaptive reserve built up so that whatever happens, I can continue to do what I want to do, and especially where I'm doing it in a city that would rather not have businesses like mine, right? That there is active legislation happening, active bills passed, active projects being greenlit that are there to prevent small businesses from being there. We would just rather have the big box established businesses in our city center. It looks shinier for tourists, and there's just more money they can get out of a big box store than a little guy, right? But there are good spots out there. We'll find them, and that's an important thing to consider. The other thing, for me is do it in a way that makes you happy. That when you try to do things in a way that other people want you to do, when I tried to force myself early on into that box of you got to sell herbs this way and you got to sell these brands and that's how it has to happen, I was not happy. It wasn't until I started writing formula and putting my hands in the medicine that I made and asking people the questions that I wanted to ask them with confidence and competence as an herbalist, that I finally got happy in the work. And I was like, oh, this is how I want to do this. It doesn't mean that's how anybody else has to do it, but it's how I'm going to do it. It's how I'm going to train my apprentices to do it, right? And some of them still do it that way, and some of them went on to do it other ways. And that's fine. There's room for all of it, right? That's a very important thing to consider too. So this has turned into way longer of a share than I intended. So thanks for sticking around. Again, I know there's a lot of negative points here that I covered, and that's not to dissuade anybody. It's really about take your time, become confident in your practice. Confident so that when you give formula to somebody, you're not losing sleep over it. Like, did I do that right? Did I screw that up? Be competent. Know what you're doing inside and out. Start with people who are going to be forgiving and put some years of work in. Then get into some community service and put some years of work in. And find somebody to apprentice with, even if it's long distance, somebody that you can send formulas to and case studies and be like, this is what I think. Can you see something I can't see? This is the traditional way of learning these arts. It's initiatory, right? The magic gets handed from one person to somebody else, and we don't have that in our world right now. We take our courses and we go to programs and we do online stuff, and all of that's great, but all that comes through is the information, is the bullet points. We miss the initiation. This is an initiatory art. So find somebody, regardless of what your education is, who can kind of whip you into shape a little bit. Like somebody who can, we used to call it in my shop, fight people, somebody who can fight club you, right? So if you haven't seen Fight Club, go watch it. You will understand the mood of what traditional mentor-apprentice roles can look like in the modern day. Granted, that movie is really intense. That scene of the people wanting to be in the cult, basically. We're totally a cult. We'll embrace that. I remember the guy coming and sleeping on the brunette, and he's like, I'm not gonna leave until you accept me, right? This is the mood. It's not necessarily what you have to do. Don't go sleep on your herbalist's porch, they're gonna be pissed. But that's the sentiment, is that I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to come in and wash jars for you for free, and take out the garbage and sweep the floors and dust the bottles in exchange for the initiation. Something we have lost, that people are unwilling to do, they're grossed out by, we feel so entitled. It's not gatekeeping, right? This is the traditional way of learning these arts, whether it's apprenticing for whatever. You can't just have it all and flip a switch, right? You got to learn, and being around people who are already doing it is how you get the quickening, how you are initiated into the ways to do it. And then from there, you can do what I did, which is learn from people, and some of the things they did really resonated with me, and I still do them the same way. And some of the things they did, what I learned is that's exactly how I don't want to do it. So I don't do it that way. It's not that you're going to become a carbon copy of the person that you apprenticeship with, or ideally the persons. You don't only want one person's voice in your head, right? But go do that. Go find somebody to learn with, see what the business side of it looks like, to help out, to contribute, to pay your dues. Your dues are not just tuition to herb school. Your dues are not just reading all the books. Your dues are not just taking notes or being able to identify plants. Your dues are opening yourself up to your herb-wise ancestors, those who are living, who have already done the work that you want to do, and those who are long since dead. You want to become part of that disciplic succession. Yes, let it flow through you. You got to work for it. You got to sweep the floors and wash the bottles. That's the nature of it. There's no other way that I have found to give that to people than to let them work themselves into receptivity, right? And to work through their stuff at the bottle washing sink. It's just the nature of it, in my opinion. Take it or leave it. So, really beautiful work, very fulfilling. We are needed in the world right now. If this is something that you feel passionate about, that you feel called to do, if you have some confidence about, if you are willing to do all the work, to stay up late and do taxes, to mop the floors, to deal with Karen clients, because you're going to get a hell of a lot of those, then do it. Stop making excuses, get out of your own way, go make it happen. The world needs this work, so go do the work. If you have any questions, you want to share your experiences of doing this work, comments down below. I'm now 25 years or so into this, and still learning every day. And I think that's the parting message, I think, today is never stop learning. You've heard this from me before in other classes. There is no such thing as a master herbalist. If somebody has ever told you you're a master herbalist, they lied to you, and you lied to yourself. The plants will never tell you you're a master over their world. You will never master herbalism. You will never meet every plant. You are not the master of any plant. You're not their boss. We don't tell them what to do. We work in relationship with them to create the needed changes in our lives that we need. They're already giving us everything, right? So to approach this from a standpoint of mastery is wrong. We are students. We are priests of the green realm. We are go-betweens. We are servants of the green realm. If you really want to get into the real mood of it, not masters. Always sitting at the root of the tree, quiet, open, listening, and then taking what we as intermediaries between the realms learn from our plant allies. We are taking that out into the world of our human kin and bringing them the medicine and the magic that they seek. That is a definition of the work. So if you stuck around all the way till now, thank you. This was supposed to be like a 15-minute thing, so hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you learned something about me and my experiences. Again, any questions or comments, you know where to put it. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week with an actual class, I promise. Take care.